You ready?
All right, yes.
Cool. Everybody, Hannah Donovan.
I hope you're awake now, everyone. Hi, guys. I hope you're awake now. It was getting kind of warm in here, so I thought I'd just put some like really crazy flashing imagery up on the screen to like wake you up in this like post-lunch or pre-lunch slump. So yeah, as Matt Sherritt said, I'm Hannah Donovan, and I'm a product designer, and mainly of sort of digital and music things. I'm originally from Canada, where it's freezing cold and snows a lot, and I moved to London about 6 years ago, where it rains a lot, to work on a music website at the time called Last.fm. How many people here are familiar with Last.fm, just so I know? Okay, cool, so I don't have to do that much explaining. Great, so I mean, it was amazing. I had the opportunity to sort of have a hand in everything from the way it looked like this to the way it worked and across all sorts of different platforms and services like mobile apps and Xbox, which is this one here. And I even got to work on a newspaper, actually, with Matt Sherritt here. We started doing that together, I think it was, what, 2009, 2010? Yeah, maybe. No, 2009, I think. Yeah. Which was a really great project and all, and also for me was like a little foray out of the digital world into the print world, which was kind of fun. Last.fm, as you guys probably know, is very data-driven, very data-focused company, and it's sort of all about tracking what people listen to. So this newspaper was based on that listening and trend data. But increasingly, while I was working there, I yearned for something that was just music recommendations that were a little bit more handpicked, a little bit more emotional, a little bit more personal, and a bit more curated. And after all, we all know that the best music recommendations come from friends. So late last year, my colleague Matthew Ogle and I started to scratch this itch with a new music service called This Is My Jam. And it's a place to put your favorite song right now, that one that you can't get out of your head, that one that's like on your iPod on repeat, and get a playlist of all your friends' handpicked favorites too. But it's really more about the curatorial side of sharing music with people than the data side. So now you know a few things about what I've been up to. You guys are all looking really serious again, so I think it's time for some rabbits. This is also something that you should know about me. I really like bunny rabbits. So I'm showing you some of my favorite bunny rabbit gifts. Isn't that one great? I love that one. Oh, I gotta get a rabbit. I really had a hard time deciding which rabbits to put on the screen today. But actually, I was looking through some childhood photos recently, partially for this talk, and I was really surprised to discover that this rabbit thing isn't new. Apparently, I was always really into rabbits because there's a good 6 months of my life where I was just dressed like this every single day. I have no idea what I was doing. Why am I even dressed like this? I don't know. It's a bit stretched. So I want to talk about my childhood quickly because while you guys were probably, watching movies and reading comics and playing video games, or I don't know what you're doing, things like this, I had this to contend with. So it was my mom's no violence rule, and while in general I'm a fan of no violence, it's not a good thing, etc., etc., all sorts of stuff was really unfairly lumped into this no violence category. There was TV, like this, movies, like Violence Against the Paranormal, also not allowed, superheroes and cartoons, also not okay, video games, all this stuff was just completely nixed. So what did I have? Well, I had music. I'm a musician myself. I play cello, and also I'm a big lover of music. But I also had a type of play, like my play, because I couldn't do that kind of stuff, was I guess what I'd call arts and crafts. I did a lot of this kind of thing, As early as I can ever remember, my play was around making things. And, crafts at birthday parties like this. I was a massive nerd, crafts with my little sisters. And eventually this crafting sort of crossed over some invisible line into design. And I realized that this kind of bizarre childhood experience, if nothing else, gave me a very unique perspective. It's a lens that I use to look at my work and the work of others, which is why today I'm talking about the importance of craft, and especially digital craft, around music. So, music and craft, right? I think they really go together, and here's why. Craft is not just something that you use to express yourself personally, like, I'm going to wear this jacket, but it's also a way to sort of pledge allegiance to a certain group of people, sort of, a tribe, maybe even. And music is very much the same way. And that's why I think they go hand in hand. Also, music is only as visual as you let it be. So this is one of the biggest pitfalls of designing for digital music, and actually was something that I encountered quite a lot early on when I was working at Last FM. When you take music and strip it down to a single audio file and represent it as such on a screen, that's like a really sort of barren, lackluster experience compared to all this other stuff that we have around music. I've sort of heard this referred to as spreadsheet music before, like the kind of stuff you see in iTunes, just like looks like I could be using Excel right now. And, obviously you're missing out on this stuff like album art and liner notes, we all know about that, etc., but there's also this amazing craft culture around it too. There's this stuff, right? Like these crazy bedroom walls and posters and badges and jackets and people like creating their own t-shirts and stuff like this. And a lot of this is visual trope, it's making within an existing design framework. It's fans sort of creating something along a certain kind of design guideline. But it also evolves, and it's this wonderful call and response between the band and the fans. It's this visual dialogue that occurs. And you can't buy it. Like this stuff is really cool, but you just can't go to a shop and pick it up. You have to make it by hand. And that's what makes it craft. Someone took the time and effort to do this, and they did it because they wanted to. Just like when I was a kid without TV to watch or comics or whatever, they're playing, they're having fun doing this. So I want to kind of rewind to 2006, because this is where I think digital craft really, really took off. This is the birthplace of it. And it was with something called MySpace. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to reminisce about MySpace for 5 minutes, and you guys can't do anything about it because you're stuck here listening. So 2006, right? This is like the golden days of MySpace, and we saw digital craft happen in a really, really big way. It moved from our bedroom walls out to the bedroom walls of the internet for absolutely everybody to see, and it was absolutely remarkable. People expressing themselves and pledging allegiance to these sort of tribes alongside the artists that they loved, and these beautiful visual dialogues started taking place between the fans and the band, and it wasn't just crafting within this sort of existing design framework that MySpace gave you, but also the fact that you could just like completely fuck things up if you wanted to. I mean, like, look at this. It's like it's crazy, and whole new types of visual culture emerged from this. Like this style of design, this aesthetic that sort of started around MIA, and she did a lot of this on her MySpace page, and so did her fans. This is all wouldn't have been possible without kind of MySpace and the tools that they had to create this aesthetic with. This is like whole new bits of visual culture. And I think this is really remarkable, and I think it's really different from the trends that I see in websites today, which is maybe a little bit more like customization as opposed to craft. So when I say customization, what I'm talking about is this sort of website or service where you can maybe like type something in a text field or upload a background image, maybe slap a filter on a photo, something like that, where you're kind of just altering something that already exists within how the designer kind of thinks it should be done. Or of course there's the full other end of the spectrum, which is the full-on creation. If you can write your own code, you can do whatever you want to reskin this Tumblr. But I think what MySpace did really well is they sort of created this area in the middle of those two polar opposite ends of the spectrum where people could craft. It was kind of like a safe way to play around with design. There was some stuff that was kind of already done for you, but then there was some other things that you could fuck with a bit and kind of make it look the way you wanted to. And that's just an area on the spectrum that I don't see a whole lot of happening anymore. Another thing that happened around this time is craft just got redefined as digital craft. And like the analog craft that I talked about earlier, it's something that you also couldn't buy, at least at first anyway. It was handmade. And like analog craft, as soon as you make something, it's relatively easy for someone else to make their own, but the scale is so much bigger, and the trends happen so much faster, and there's also multiple copies being collaborated on at any one time. So as craft was redefined, we saw the importance of portability emerge, which is why I think memes like this, AstroCAD, or animated GIFs like the breakdance bear, are really good examples of digital craft because they are so portable. They can live across all these different spaces and they can be collaborated on. So it's still this handmade thing that's happening, but it's not really one of a kind anymore. So now you've heard me wax really poetic about MySpace for a couple of minutes here, so I'm gonna put the lid down on this for a second just so you don't walk out of here thinking, yeah, I heard this designer talk about why MySpace was amazing. I mean, it was for certain things, and it taught us a lot, which I am very, which I do really love. But the problem with it eventually is it became like this exploding craft cupboard, It was like this one that I had at home when I was a kid, where you're the kind of cupboard where you try and slam the door, but as you do, there's felt pens and yarn falling out and rolling onto the floor, and you just you don't even want to open it anymore because there's a monster that lives in there, right? A monster of finger paint that's going to jump out at you. It became a really messy user experience. So while it's certainly not a standard of design with regards to user experience, it still did teach us some lessons in this respect. So let's scan forward to 2012. We're seeing a bunch of other things happen and people trying to tackle this problem in different ways. And I think things like Tumblr are interesting for this reason. A lot of music blogs on Tumblr, you can kind of do what you want with it. But to me, it still sort of feels like it's either customization or creation, but not so much the crafting in the middle. And the other thing that kind of bothers me about this is I actually don't know what is handmade on Tumblr anymore because everything is so recycled that it's actually impossible to tell what is and what isn't. Instagram is another pretty interesting example. I mean, Instagram itself, I don't think, is a great example of craft, but all the sort of photo apps that have sprung up around Instagram are really interesting examples of craft, and people sort of trying to do slightly different things than just the bog standard filters that you get with it. Also, I do a lot of sort of field research and talking to the kids about, how they use music and express themselves through music. And something that I find really interesting about Instagram, sort of particularly the Justin Bieber believers, is that they do a lot of sort of taking a picture of me or themselves and a video of Justin Bieber in the background and putting a filter on it. And for them, just sharing this online is a way of expressing how much they love him that's more than somehow just sharing a link of him on the internet, which is, I think, a really interesting example of sort of putting your mark on something and crafting it as yours. But when I talk to them, by and large, by a big margin, the thing that people still use, or for the most part, for sharing music is Facebook. It's YouTube links on Facebook. You get taken to YouTube, it dumps you off there, and you're now on this different site where it's not even a really personal or expressive experience anymore. And also maybe just if you can, you get this sort of cover image thing happening here, which has really taken off because I think people are yearning for this way to express themselves. They need it, and there isn't as many ways to do that as there were before. So I think Facebook is incredible for many reasons. I'm not hating on it. But when it comes to music, I do feel like this is maybe a little bit lackluster of an experience, which is another reason for us to sort of scratch our itch to make This Is My Jam. So it was also about, it's still very early days and a very experimental project, but it was also about, we wanted to find out what would happen, what would people do if we gave them a dedicated space, not only for sharing music, but also that kind of allowed them to craft with it a little bit more. So this is an example of a profile page on This Is My Jam, and someone sort of crafted it and changed it up a little bit to sort of make this experience and this art go together. And we've given over this huge amount of what we call page real estate for you to do that with. Where most sites sort of want to stick some other stuff in here. We've kind of put that down towards the bottom and given over this space for craft. So that's part of the experiment there as well. So why does this all matter, right? Why am I up here talking about craft and MySpace and things? Well, I think that's how I got here, and I think it's also how many others probably got from that original craft cover to something bigger. Craft was sort of the gateway for them, maybe into design, or maybe to do something a bit more with culture, to create something that had a larger impact. And as the lines between physical and digital blur completely, the young generation today that's growing up, they're not going to be crafting in the same media as I did. They're not going to be doing this kind of stuff. There's a very good chance that their first interaction with craft and music is going to be something like Facebook. So, some people don't like the craft cupboard, I get that, and other people absolutely love it. But more importantly, there are some people out there that don't even know that they like it yet. They haven't even had the opportunity to play with it yet. And this opportunity for play is something that could really change the way how they live, and something that could change our culture. And that's why I believe we need to be open to this opportunity and build it into the things that we're making. Thanks very much.